Coming up today on Eagle Eyes on Tech, Samsung has plans to make hard drives completely obsolete, both in the consumer and enterprise markets. Cnet is literally ruining the internet. We'll get into detail how so. Another GPU shortage may be coming, and the story of Overwatch 2 and Baldur's Gate 3 is absolutely fascinating. All that and more coming today on Eagle Eyes on Tech. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, notice to him, go to this, the guys on Tech Guy. I'm Eagle Falcon. We have honestly not a lot to get to. This might be the first week I do not have a lot to get to. Like, we say that every week, and every week there's like 20, 30, 40 stories to get to, and I end up like axing a few before we get to, but this week there hasn't been that much. A lot of them, I'll be perfectly honest, have strictly been like, we found a new way to compute. We found someone that's able to do this style of computing at room temperature, and then it turns out it was all fake. There was then a lot of those kind of stories that a story later on would then prove that the previous story was completely irrelevant. So all we got left is what we got left, but that's kind of the point, right? I want to make sure here that the stories we do cover are either important, something I have something very interesting to say about, or are just plain silly. Sometimes it overlaps because we do cover some stories that are very fascinating, very interesting, and very environmental ramifications if the technology does go through, like last week with the water-soluble PCB, but at the same time, you can't help but laugh at a water-soluble PCB. There's always some overlap there, right? Now, here's one thing. I actually don't know if we have a story covering this sort of thing today. Before we actually even get the stories, I actually want to put in a little thought into your head regarding Twitter. All right. Most of us just insist on calling Twitter because Twitter is a much better name for it, right? I'm in that same boat. I've been calling it Twitter forever. The current name is really stupid. It is I would argue, and a lot of people agree with me, the worst marketing decision ever done ever. Yes, I know there are too many words in that sentence. I don't care. Period. But I started thinking for a minute, all right? People are going to do their best to just keep saying Twitter just because it's been ingrained in our brains as tech users for so long. How can we not? But hear me out for a minute, all right? What if we did start calling it X? What if we actually did commit to what Elon wants us to do? What if we all commit to calling it the most bland, boring, pointless, absolutely forgettable, worst marketing decision name ever? I think those that actually want Twitter to fail and want Elon's venture into Twitter to fail, I think they absolutely should insist on calling it X. 100%. Because if you're actually looking for Twitter to fail and something better and newer to rise up out of the ashes, because it sure as heck isn't going to be X, I guarantee you that. I think you need to make sure that the mind share of Twitter is gone, and there's no way it is going to be brand freaking X. It's just a random thought I had while on the job. I've actually been having to work quite a bit on the weekends now, just because there's been so much going on. Hopefully it's just a one weekend sort of thing. But maybe we should actually start the actual podcast, huh? Maybe that's the thing we should be doing 5 minutes into the show. I hear people like it when I actually do a podcast during the podcast segment. Or should we just talk about more about how frickin' Twitter should actually be called X, just so we can see the downfall of Twitter? Nah, I have nothing more to say on the matter. Instead, let's turn to Google, who wants to talk about Downfall and Zenbleed, two new vulnerabilities in Intel and AMD architectures, respectfully. There are also some other vulnerabilities that have been found going by the name of Inception, and I forgot what the other one was. All right, these are all security vulnerabilities that directly target the architecture of AMD and Intel to allow an attacker to, well, do what all these vulnerabilities do. Allow the attacker to get a hold of encrypted data that they should not be able to get to normally. These are horrible, earth-shattering, horrifying, flippin' whatevers, and oh god, we need to panic or whatever. Can you tell I'm bored of these? And I'm especially bored of these 4 new ones in particular. You want to know why? Because literally days after they were discovered and brought to the public eye, BIOS and chipset updates are already out that patch them. At this time of reporting, there have been no performance drops that are known because of it. Though one report did claim that the patch for Downfall for Intel results in a 50% performance downgrade. I have a hard time believing that. Because quite frankly, if there was a 50% performance downgrade with an update, it would be far, far bigger news. Do you have any idea how big a 50% performance downgrade is? If my PC, if the PC that I stream on lost 50% of its performance, guess what? This podcast and stream would not be happening. There's no way. There just wouldn't be enough CPU power left. Especially since that even though I have 16 CPU cores, if both of them were dropped by half and OBS can't talk to both CPUs simultaneously, you're effed. You're toast. So that's something to keep an eye on. Keep an eye out for BIOS updates. You will probably want to do them. But of course, like with all these CPU vulnerabilities, the attacker has to target your system specifically. And let's be perfectly honest, your PC is not the target of these. It is going to be massive data centers that are going to be the target of these sort of things. But at the same time, these security guys love naming their vulnerabilities. And that's honestly more interesting than the actual vulnerabilities themselves. Now, here's a PSA that you actually will care about. SanDisk has a problem, specifically with the SanDisk Extreme Pro. These portable SSDs that can hold up to 3 terabytes. Actually, I think it can hold more. But the article specifically from The Verge is kind of whining and complaining that they lost 3 terabytes of videos of storage on theirs. I have no idea how big these things can get. But in any case, the SanDisk Extreme Pro has a problem with them that can cause the SSD to just fail and all data on them will be lost. This is now, as much as I'd love to just poke fun of The Verge for losing all their data on an SSD and deciding to go ahead and make a article about it, whining and complain about it, this actually is a known issue and more people are talking about it. There is a firmware update. However, here's my advice. Have a backup. One of the reasons why my own YouTube operation has been basically out of commission for so long, we've been out of commission for like over a month now. I think we're going on 2 months. I'd have to go back and look. Is simply because we didn't have a backup server. And because of a backplane failure and trying to very poorly diagnose the backplane, because no signs pointed to the backplane, we end up wiping all our data, assuming it was all lost. It wasn't, by the way. Now it is, though. We could have totally recovered all that data that we lost. It would have just been like that, back. All you do is replace the backplane. What if we had a backup server like I intended, but just never had the funds to dedicate to it? Wouldn't have the problem. Nope. Just restore the whole thing from the backup. Easy peasy. Coulda, woulda, shoulda, right? You learn. And it doesn't matter whether you have a 12U rack sitting in your dining room like you're some kind of data hoarding crazy person. Not that I would be anyone like that. Or if you're just someone with a handful of portable SSDs, have a backup for your backup, because you never know what's going to happen. I cannot stress that enough. If you do have one of these SanDisk Extreme Pros, check the website. There is a firmware update to help fix the issue with these. So do that and have a backup. Preferably a backup that is not another SanDisk Extreme Pro. You know, that's just my advice. Right? I mean, you do what you want to do. I'm not your real dad. Here's what I will say, though. In the data hoarding space, things are going to get very, very interesting. All right. Right now, if you're a home user, what is the cheapest way to have a big honking backup system? It's going to be, you know, either external hard drives, or if you want to go for a high-end solution, you either take a used PC, load it up with some hard drives, because you can pick up, you know, 6, 10, 12, 22 terabyte hard drives, depending on how much you want to spend per drive, and just load them into either a NAS or a computer you've converted into a NAS. Or if you're a crazy person, you grab some used enterprise equipment and turn that into your NAS. Not that I would do that in a 12U rack. All right. But in the data center, things are a little different. Well, first, let's actually get back to the home use. The main reason you do the hard drives is because they're cheaper. Okay. When push comes to shove, hard drives are right now the cheapest when it comes to large capacity terabyte per dollar. People in chat are suggesting cloud solutions. You can do a cloud solution if you want. I wouldn't, simply because what happens when that cloud is broken into? Remember how we were talking earlier about Zenbleed and whatnot? Yeah, clouds are going to be targeted for that sort of thing. I encourage people, regardless of their tech experience, use a local backup. If you want a cloud backup too, that's fine. But I'd still go ahead and have a local backup as well. If you're concerned about your privacy, definitely don't use a cloud. Chat says always use cloud. There'll be extra copies. It's more redundancies. If you're concerned about privacy, you should absolutely not use the cloud. That might be the like data paranoia in me talking there, but no. No. I've seen how these tech companies go ahead and handle data. The less I give them, the better. Oh, but their privacy policy says that they can't look at it. Yeah, that you think. But that's what the home user does. What about enterprise? What about those cloud services? In the cloud service world, in the enterprise world, a couple of things are king. Density of your storage and compute, and power consumption. At home, you don't care too much about your power consumption for electronics. All right? Most people don't care if their gaming PC consumes 50 more watts than it should. In the data center, ooh, man. If per server node, you can find a way to save 5 watts per server node across thousands of nodes in your data center, tens of thousands, woo, the savings stack up very quickly. In addition, you are paying for the square footage of the data center. So the denser the drives, the better. So what am I getting at here? What is this all leading up to? Well, hard drives are huge. They use the form factor we call 3.5. SSDs use one of two form factors right now. They use the 2.5-inch drive standard or the M.2 standard. M.2s are extremely small, and 2.5-inch drives are basically laptop drive sized. Samsung has introduced an SSD that pretty much makes hard drives in the data center 100% obsolete unless the data center is extremely cache limited, because this sucker is going to be very expensive when it first launches. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the 256 terabyte SSD. Whoa. Normally, in archival storage, to be able to get a petabyte or 1,000 terabytes, you are taking up a full 4U disk shelf plus another 1U server node to power said disk shelf. For those of you who don't know what a U is, that is the unit of space measured in a server rack. A full-size server rack is 42 U's. This SSD, because the one they're showing is able to fit into an NVMe form factor, means that theoretically, you could get two of these into a 2.5-inch bay form factor, meaning theoretically, you could get 512 terabytes into one 2.5-inch bay drive connected to a U.2, which is the enterprise grade PCI Express connector that servers use. You could condense that 5U of petabyte storage down to just one, and that would be in what's referred to as a RAID 1 redundancy, meaning that for every one drive in there, you have a duplicate with the exact same data on there, so that if one drive dies, it still keeps going with the duplicated data, which is very inefficient in the data center, and you never do that. You usually use RAID 5, RAID 6, or if you're actually in the current year, you use ZFS as your RAID cycle, which I don't fully understand it either. This is huge. And if they can go ahead and produce this cheap enough, like I guarantee you when this thing launches, they don't have it right now, but when this sucker launches, I almost guarantee you it's going to be like 50 grand per SSD, because it's going to be targeted at the enterprise market. But let's even imagine that a fraction of this makes it down to the consumer market. Let's say a 32 terabyte SSD makes it down to the consumer market. All right. At say, let's say $300. All right. Why would you buy a hard drive at that point? It's bigger, it's faster, and it's physically way smaller and way more efficient. That's the other huge thing that this is going to make for data centers. It's an SSD, which means it sips power. And on top of that, it's going to have a predictive fail cycle in it as well, whereas a hard drive is harder to predict. Someone in chat says, what's stopping you? The number of writes. Are you saying that a hard drive has an unlimited number of writes? The argument that SSDs have a limited number of writes is so stupid. I'm sorry, it is. Because the number of writes you get on an SSD is so massively high that the hard drive is going to fail from either number of writes as well, or some other mechanical frickin' failure. They said they have less. They do not. I'm sorry, they do not. The argument of number of writes on an SSD versus a hard drive, that's like 5 years ago. Now, if you're using a different kind of SSD, one that is more built for high performance, that's another thing. Here's the thing. No one uses those anymore because no one has to. No one needs to. You're talking like your Optane level of storage and those kind of drives and those. I can't even remember what some of the other ones are. The number of writes argument for SSDs, it means it's going to go ahead and just, it's gonna fail in 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, depending on how much you use it. In an enterprise environment, obviously, you're not going to run just one of these in a server. No one ever runs one of these in a server in a enterprise level environment. For a consumer, well, remember how earlier we were talking about that one hard drive or that SSD, that portable SSD, and you should always go ahead and make sure you have a backup? Make sure you have a backup, because you never know when the storage will, not if, will die. But if you're using a hard drive because it theoretically has more number of writes versus a SSD, that's stupid. I'm sorry, it is. Twitter may choose to use one. Executive decision, says the chat. Executive decisions at Twitter don't matter. They don't. I'm sorry, but decisions at Twitter are literally irrelevant. They're just... Oh. Anytime you hear the word an executive decision and Twitter, just assume whatever follows was one of the worst decisions they ever made. I think the only exception to that rule has been community notes, which, by the way, I don't have it anymore right now. I'd have to go try to find it again. I found it hilarious that one of the Temu ads on Twitter got a community note because the Temu ad was falsely advertising a price. They were saying like you get this like portable like emulation box that looks like a Game Boy for like $11. And the community note says it's only available for $118 even for new users. Seriously, community notes was the best decision that Twitter has made in a long time. Unfortunately, it has to be paired with every other bad decision Twitter has made. Seriously, when's our new CEO taking over Twitter? Or is that how Elon's weaseling out of having to step down as CEO? He said he was going to step down as CEO of Twitter. Twitter is now gone. It's now X. Is that our weaseling out of it? Ugh. Let's shift gears and never talk about Twitter ever again. I'm kidding. We'll talk about Twitter later. New research has shown that CAPTCHAs are pointless. Because you see, researchers have shown that the bots are able to solve CAPTCHAs better than humans. For those who don't know what a CAPTCHA is one of those "are you a robot" tests, and it usually has you either check a box, identify all bicycles in a grid of pictures, slide the monkey to the banana, insert the puzzle piece, read a jumbled mess of nonsense, and type in what it is in English and all kinds of other things like that. It turns out that computer bots are now faster, more efficient, and more accurate at solving the CAPTCHAs than people. Oof. That's a yikes right there. Now, with that said, let's be perfectly honest for a minute. Who is really surprised? Anyone? Is anyone really surprised by this? Because you really shouldn't be. The hard push of AI and trying to scour the entire internet for information to feed in these large language models has just been a ton of evidence that, in fact, people are going to find ways to get around everything involving bot prevention. Well, lo and behold, this is what the arms race of anti-bots has come to. They can now fully get past this nonsense. We're going to take our first break here. When we come back, Cnet ruining the internet. What do I mean by this? Find out after the break. Welcome back, Eagle Eyes on Tech. I'm Eagle Falcon. Sorry, I got lost in the jams there for a second. Someone in chat during the break actually brought up something that is actually a far bigger point than they may or may not realize. But they mentioned the whole thing about bots beating people at proving they're not bots was just like, oh, let's just do what Twitter and Reddit did about scraping data, make it prohibitively expensive. And they said this mildly sarcastically, obviously, but there is a huge point to this. This is the reason why the CAPTCHA is so important, to make sure that people accessing data on these sites are in fact people and not just bots trying to get around the back end. Because what was made prohibitively expensive was the API. This is what most software uses to access the data of these websites. But these bots that are scraping data are going in through the human side of things and tricking the sites into thinking they're people, which then makes what Twitter and Reddit did that much dumber. Because now they just went ahead, pissed off their developers, so now any sort of unique, interesting things that could be done with their platforms are not going to be done because now it's prohibitively expensive to do so, but they didn't even tackle the problem they had in the first place. So it's a lose, 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 lose that these two poorly run companies have done. It's what makes it so much more painful to see it all done. Okay, we had to increase the API costs because bots are scraping everything. Cool. Now they're just doing it from the human side, like a lot of them were doing in the first place. And now you're hurting the customer base on top of all that. Cool. Thanks. I hate it. And everyone was upset. Let's talk about Cnet and what they are doing that is, I would say, ruining the internet. So let's get to what's going on. All right. Cnet is going around in a attempt to save their business model and trying to game Google search results. And the way they're doing this is infuriating. They are deleting old articles off their own site in attempt to, well, trick the Google search algorithm to put Cnet higher on the rankings. Now, why is this ruining the internet? I cannot stress enough how useful old articles are. For example, in the profession I used to be in, which was refurbishing old laptops, refurbishing old computers, when you don't recognize a model, like, oh God, what was the name of that one really wacky freaking HP gaming desktop that I saw? Oh man, I am now blanking on it, but it was a really weird boy. God, this is gonna drive me nuts now. I'm not gonna find it for a what ever again. It was like called like the Firebird or something like that. And I'm sure that's not it. It had like a dragonfly logo on it. It was like suspended. It was like suspended on its own pedestal. It was like all liquid cooled on the inside. It was built like a laptop on the inside, but with desktop components. It was bizarre. But in any case, while going through, pallets upon pallets of computers and trying to find something interesting to go and work on, finding an old Cnet article, or actually, I think it was actually Gizmodo article in this case, talking about the bloody thing and what potential problems it had, was crucial in that kind of treasure hunting. So if Cnet's going through getting rid of obsolete articles in order to go ahead and promote their more current ones, all they're doing now is making them an even less reliable source of any kind of information in the long term. Like, they're saying this is all done to delete its history in order to game its search engine, which, by the way, Google says that deleting old pages to bamboozle search is apparently not a thing. But Cnet's erasing its history anyway, which, again, is infuriating. Hell, this podcast was originally inspired by Cnet from their own podcast, Buzz Out Loud, from, God, how long ago? Over 10 years ago? Buzz Out Loud is long gone now, of course. What are you going to do? Delete those too? I don't know what Cnet thinks it's doing, but it's only going to hurt them. Now, what it could be is that they're using this gaming the search history or gaming the search history thing as a cover for just clearing up some old archives. We just don't want to host this stuff anymore. The cost of hosting all this information is just way too prohibitive. That could be the case. I'd believe that, and just believe that the corporate overlords over at Cnet, because keep in mind, Cnet is owned by CBS. I could see them just using that as an excuse for all of this. It wouldn't surprise anyone at all. With no good way to shift gears, let's talk about NVIDIA, our new favorite company to hate. God, is there anyone that NVIDIA hasn't pissed off? I think it's pretty much just AI people. I think that's the only people that are not unhappy with NVIDIA right now. They have ticked off the professional market with a confusing naming scheme. They have ticked off the enterprise market with investors. I guess investors they haven't ticked off yet. Well, the investors are going to really like this, and so are all the AI people, which are pretty much the only two people now left behind NVIDIA. Everyone else really wants to go and kick Jensen in the nuts as NVIDIA unveils its next generation Grace Hopper superchip platform specifically for accelerated computing and generative AI. What this is starting to show, by the way, now that we're already seeing a second generation of Grace Hopper, is one huge, undeniable truth. NVIDIA is going to invest tons upon tons upon tons of resources into AI. There is no other way to say it. Which also means that your higher end GPUs are going to be, well, they're most likely just going to be converted over to being AI chips. Now, the thing with Grace Hopper is that you do have a CPU that is ARM based on there, but there is a GPU with them that is doing a lot of the AI calculations. So it's not like 100% of the chip is going there, but a large chunk of it is, which unfortunately is bringing this very worrying cautionary tale. This word of caution, as I should have said. There are more and more and more alarm bells being sounded for another GPU shortage. So, while everything AI continues to push further and further forward, while more and more people try to figure out what is AI truly good for rather than all of these demonstrations, because right now that's what most AI work is. It's demonstrations. Most of the time, whenever any company tries to go ahead and show what their AI can do and actually use in a practical sense, well, you end up with news sites going ahead and talking about how Glorbo is coming to a video game and how everyone's excited for Glorbo, a long-awaited feature to go ahead and be introduced, which, by the way, Glorbo never existed ever except inside Rick and Morty. And even in Rick and Morty, nobody knew what Glorbo was. Which, yes, That is the joke. So while your big players are going to be looking at the Grace Hopper line, these like multi $10,000 to $100,000 systems specifically built for AI, there's still tons upon tons of startups looking to try and get into AI and large language models. And what everyone is starting to see is that these small startups are buying up, you guessed it, the gaming GPUs at their currently inflated value. And the demand is going up. Not radically going up, but it is starting to go up. And that's why a lot of experts are forecasting a GPU shortage very similar to what we saw during the pandemic. I don't know how many more ways I can say I really do feel bad for PC builders. And heck, anyone that's looking to upgrade their PC too, I mean, what do you do now? Do we just assume that the AI boom's not going to be as bad as we expect? Do we heed the cautionary words and go out and go nuts and quickly get that upgrade while we can? Or do we just give up on PCs and just get a console of some kind? I don't have the answer, unfortunately. I wish I did, but I don't. Someone in chat says buy a Steam Deck. I'd follow that under... I would actually, despite the fact that the Steam Deck plays PC games, I would actually, at this point, classify the Steam Deck as a console. Like, its capabilities are better than your average game console. Just like in feature set. I don't mean like actual power. I'm willing to bet the PS5 right next to me is going to go ahead and outperform the Steam Deck, no problem. You just can't compare, you know, portable device versus popped collar monolith. But I mean, the Steam Deck is still more function filled. So this is something that we need to keep a very close eye on. We need to go ahead and see if these forecasts are correct. Meanwhile, though, maybe the answer is just AMD. Because here's the thing to consider, okay? Just about everything AI related right now is all focused on NVIDIA. AMD doesn't really have that sort of appeal to the AI market, not like crypto did. Crypto, you could just go ahead and use any GPU. Sometimes AMD was better at it, sometimes NVIDIA was better at it. But in this case, it appears that, well, AMD does not appear to be compatible to a lot of these AI models. That may change, but perhaps AMD is the way to go. Well, there's some bad news. AMD has no intention with the RDNA 4 GPUs to compete in the high end with NVIDIA. Now, considering the fact that no one can afford the high end with NVIDIA, this might not be the worst thing in the world. But it does mean that those crazy high-end 4090s, or I guess 5090s, and 5080s that would come out are just going to stand all up on their own in the 4-digit line. We couldn't afford them anyway, despite the fact that these were lines that, well, we could afford before at $500. Someone in chat says, what is high end anyway but fake frames? That's the thing. Here's the worst part. The high end in NVIDIA does have a high frame rate with real frames without using that frame generation technology using fake frames. It's the lower end NVIDIA cards that are getting like, oh, look at these frame rates you can get. Those are the ones being like comparable but using fake frames. That's the infuriating part. That's what's giving the snake oil feel. Your 4080s, your 4090s are insane real frame rate performance monsters, but who cares? Because they cost as much as a car. It's what's nuts. But then NVIDIA just goes ahead and says, here's your 4060. The actual amount of frame rate you're getting is crap. It's actually lower than the 3060 from last year. But thanks to fake frame generation, it's actually higher with a massive asterisk next to it. It's not the high end that's the fake frame problem. It's the low end. That's why we're all pissed off. That's why every single tech nut is so absolutely livid with NVIDIA. Because what is real performance is so far out of reach, I have to go ahead and frickin' work myself to death with 3 jobs to afford. And what I can afford would first off make it so I have to skip eating for a week, because it's also crazy expensive, and that is the snake oil. It's infuriating. It is absolutely infuriating what NVIDIA is doing. And to see AMD kind of just focus on the mid-range, it's fine for the short term, but let me tell you a little something about history. The last time AMD said they weren't going to compete with NVIDIA at the high end, you know what we got? We got Polaris. And Polaris, we thought was going to be the death of AMD in the GPU market. Because it was just the same GPU being released again and 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 again. It was depressing. And I really hope that's not what RDNA 4 is going to be. I'm really hoping that AMD is going to be able to still fight with the 5070 at their high end. That they're just going to go, okay, we can't touch the 5080 or the 5090 or whatever is about to come. For most people, a 60 class is fine, like someone in the chat just said. But God, someone's got to kick NVIDIA's butt. Someone has to. It's what the consumer base desperately needs. And to see an AMD just raise the white flag here is... it's disheartening. It's almost as disheartening as seeing AMD sell $1,000 GPU. But maybe there is an answer. Maybe the answer is PS5 cloud gaming. The beta testing is rolling out. You can go ahead and play on the cloud. No need for a crazy expensive GPU to put in your relatively cheap gaming PC. This is just sad. I mean, first off, I hate gaming or cloud gaming. The concept is interesting. I wouldn't mind setting up something like this in my own server rack. Just getting like building my own like gaming cloud system and access it remotely for that sort of thing. It seems like a fun project to do for an enthusiast. For the average person, I don't know, it just feels wrong. Maybe I'm just stuck in my old ways. Maybe I'm just, I'm asking for too much to expect low latency for that sort of thing. Maybe for the average user, this is fine. And maybe I'm just stuck in my old ways. This is what I'd argue, though. There's no weak version of the PS5. So what benefit am I getting by playing the high-end game on the cloud versus locally, other than, you know, the PS5 consuming less power? It just doesn't feel like there's any benefit. You know, cool, your beta testing going on, go for it. Go compete with Microsoft in the space that, at least from what I've seen, very, very few gamers actually truly care about. More and more people would rather do the compute locally. You know, unless it's some sort of crazy render. Then go send it off elsewhere. But more people would rather just see more efficient chips locally on smaller devices, like, say, the M3 Max that is now being apparently tested. Now, right now, I think Apple is still on the M2, right? I don't think they've actually announced an M3. I'm actually now way less sure. Yeah, okay, there's just reported testing going on for M3. They're still on M2 right now. But there's reports of the M3 coming as soon as 2024. More reports of the M3 Max being a 16-core, 40 GPU, and 48 gigs of RAM. Everything kind of pointing to the M3 for Apple being a much bigger improvement compared to M1 to M2. Because that was the big thing with the M2. It did not appear to be a huge upgrade versus the M1. It's like, why? Why bother? That also being said, the M3 Ultra is apparently going to be a 32-core CPU with up to 80 GPU cores. Would make sense. That also being said, though, man, the prices on this stuff from Apple this generation. Am I the only one that no, I'm not the only one. that thinks this is all crazy overpriced. It clearly is. Should we get to one more story before we get to the break? Let's get to one more story. This one I'm actually curious what people think about, because this one isn't really tech related, but it kinda is, but kinda isn't. Because this is a trend we kind of saw pop up during the pandemic, and it was pushed thanks to technology. It's the concept of ghost kitchens. What is a ghost kitchen? Well, what you would do is, let's say you wanted to start up a restaurant, but you didn't want to open up a lot of locations. You could instead hire these ghost kitchens that would cook up the food to your spec and then use Uber Eats or DoorDash or whatever to deliver your food to the customer directly. But there wouldn't be, you know, the actual restaurant. In the case of this story, it's actually going to be involving Mr. Beast Burgers. He's one of the biggest concepts of this sort of thing. And what ended up happening is Mr. Beast is suing Virtual Dining Concepts, one of his ghost kitchens down in, I believe it's New York. Yes, it's in New York, for apparently intentionally serving lower quality food than what was originally promised. I don't think in any other anything would you ever see, can you imagine the owner of McDonald's suing McDonald's franchise owners for serving subpar food? This is something that would be unheard of in any other industry, but this is enabled because the whole concept of ghost kitchens basically has no standards at all. Because anyone can go ahead and apply to be a kitchen of this spontaneously made out of the blue franchise. And of course, because it's Mr. Beast, one of the wealthiest YouTubers out there, well, how did this end up what ended up happening? Something even more bizarre. The Mr. Beast Burger Company suing Mr. Beast for $100 million for alleged damages. Claiming that the YouTuber didn't deliver on his contractual obligations, including publicity and promotional work, failing to publicly support Mr. Beast Burger, and making untruthful, disparaging statements. So on one hand, you have Mr. Beast filing a lawsuit because a number of the ghost kitchens are just not up to expectations for delivering this food. On the other hand, you have what appears to be not just that ghost kitchen, but the entire company of Mr. Beast Burgers. I'm actually looking to see if there is a specific name. They just keep referring to as Mr. Beast Burger, so I have to assume the actual company that Mr. Beast started that did all this is then suing Mr. Beast for not promoting this enough. I this whole thing is a mess. Just 100% a mess. I'm actually curious what a lot of you out there think about this whole thing. Like, I would have thought that Jimmy Donaldson, aka Mr. Beast, which, by the way, The Verge continues to refer to Mr. Beast as just Donaldson throughout this. Who refers to anyone by their last name unless they specifically want to be addressed as their last name? It's weird. You're weird, Verge. But we knew this already. Like, where everyone sits on the whole ghost kitchen concepts, all of this, I have no idea how this is going to go, strictly because no one has just ever thought before, hey, let's just go ahead and hire any other kitchen, never fire up our own, and then just launch a bunch of virtual restaurants everywhere. Because of that, you're hands off. You have no actual control over it. So do you have grounds to sue when quality falls below standard? We don't know, because it's never been done before. Does the virtual dining concept able to sue their founder for not promoting it enough, despite the fact that when it first launched, there was a lot of promotion going on? Actually, lately, at least from what I've seen, Mr. Beast has been more focused on his candy bar line than anything. Is that just all there is to it? It's just Mr. Beast Burger just feeling neglected. Is that all it is? I have no idea. We're going to take our last break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Elon briefly, as well as Overwatch and Baldur's Gate 3 in a lot more detail. The parallel between those two games and how things went is fascinating. We'll be back. Welcome back, Eagle Eyes on Tech. I'm Eagle Falcon. All right, first things first. This crossed the radar as more talks are going on with the alleged fight that will eventually be happening on August 26th between the Zuck and the Musk. I should call it Zuck versus Musk. Allegedly, the two are supposed to be fighting in the ring, and I don't know why, but The Verge felt it was necessary to show me the most pasty, mildly toned Zuckerberg ever, and I feel like I am looking at a photoshopped alien. I feel haunted by this picture. But apparently Zuckerberg has been training with some UFC champions, and actually does look like he probably could beat up at least me in a fight, and most likely definitely Elon in a fight, considering that Elon so far just has the power of pissing people off and not much else. So Zuckerberg at this point is straight up saying on Threads, which by the way is pretty much already dead, that there is no way this fight is going to happen. He is not going to hold his breath on this fight actually happening. Here's what I'll say on this. I'm about 60-40 in thinking this fight is not going to happen. All right. 60% I think it's not going to happen. 40% Elon believes his own nonsense so much that he's actually going to show up to have the snot beaten out of him. I just don't know what else to say about it, man. The real question, will it actually help Twitter's numbers for all of this? What's that? That's not technology? All right, fine. We'll quickly talk about technology. Let's talk about the iPhone 15. It's apparently going to be scheduled for September 13th. And by that, I mean there's going to be an event on September 13th to go ahead and actually announce the phone, which so far appears to just have the amazing feature of smaller bezels and most likely a newer processor and probably not much else. If I had to guess, all right, usually the way this goes is 2 weeks after the announcement is when the iPhone comes out. So September 29th is most likely going to be when the iPhone comes out. That's my bold scientific prediction. And I'm willing to bet the new features are going to be a bigger camera, smaller bezels, the fastest processor ever in an iPhone, and other such buzzwords that make you think it's the greatest thing ever, when in fact, actually, it's pretty meh. Oh, no, don't worry, chat. There's no notch, like you're saying. There's no notch. No. It's no longer a notch. It's an exit wound. It's not a notch taken out of the screen. It's a hole. And the best part is they use software to make the hole change shape. So your exit wound can get bigger or smaller. It probably is something that I would actually probably accept way more if I actually got back into iPhones. Ugh. Man, I don't know what to do phone wise. Because on one hand, I feel like I'm in an abusive relationship with Samsung. But God, going back to Apple, that also was just another. That's also an abusive relationship I see. But at least it's an abusive relationship where you occasionally get chocolates before getting slugged in the face. I just want a phone experience where I'm treated like someone who's loved. All right, have I been canceled enough for these for comparing owning a phone to domestic abuse? Yeah, probably. We should just go ahead and move on to clearly a more healthier relationship, like Overwatch 2. That's a healthy relationship, right? Right? Yeah, to say that the relationship between Blizzard game players and Blizzard is healthy is yeah. It's not good. This is not a good place to be right now, especially in the world of Overwatch. Overwatch 2 is becoming more and more apparent as just being one massive cash grab. And what's absolutely hilarious is the fact that on Steam right now, Overwatch 2 somehow, I'm not sure how, because I'm pretty sure there's got to be like some freaking nothing game that has like one negative review and thus far has 100% negative and is thus far the most hated game on Steam. But somehow Overwatch 2 is the most disliked game on all of Steam. Most of the messages, of course, talking about how low or absolute low effort the dev team is at right now. And it's hard to argue with that. You're having new heroes, but the effort that's going into the heroes just seems lacking. And the fact that all the new heroes requires very predatory battle passes to get is absolutely infuriating. And then, of course, promises made and promises broken again and again and again and again. Like, real talk. What was improved in Overwatch 2 versus Overwatch 1? I'm waiting. Come on. Say it right in the earphones that I have no way of listening back to. I'm sure someone can probably point out like one or two very minor things. But for the most part, this just feels like they don't care. They care about monetizing this more. They care about trying to just milk this for all it's worth. But of course, you do have some diehards trying to cope. Take this Twitter post from someone who went ahead and paid for Twitter. Yeah, I'm going to call out this person for paying for Twitter because they clearly broke the 280 character limit. So we already know this guy's a sucker because he went ahead and paid for Twitter. But here's what's amazing. Here's the logic they're using. Okay? Overwatch 2 currently has 100,000 reviews on Steam since launching 3 days ago. 91% are negative. However, nearly 2/3 of those reviews are written in South Chinese, with 97% of them being negative. On the surface, the Chinese reviews mention a lot of the same elements as reviews from the rest of the world. A lack of promised PvE content, criticism over the in-game content pricing, and perceived downgrades compared to Overwatch 1, and cited in all language. But they're trying to say that this review bomb is coming from China specifically because of the negotiations that fell through with NetEase. All right, you want to know why I don't believe this cope? Here's the main reason why I don't believe this cope. Steam is not allowed in China! China has a very specific version of Steam, and only very specific games are allowed on there. Chinese players cannot even access the same Steam to leave these reviews. Now, of course, there's ways around it. I seriously doubt 63,000 of these are specifically coming from China. Is it possible that NetEase is so salty over what happened that they're doing this big a review bombing? It's possible. I really don't feel like sifting through 100,000 negative reviews to see if 63,000 of them are in fact written in actual Chinese characters. But holy cow. I would almost argue it's irrelevant. All right. Here's the downside of this. Here's the bottom line of all this. If you want to go ahead and lie to yourself and say, oh, no, Overwatch is great. It's fantastic. It's just the Chinese that are making it look worse than it actually is. You might actually be just so delusional that they could just go ahead and just start charging you $100 a month, and you're still going to go ahead and pay it because you're that diehard into Overwatch 2. You need to stop doing that, by the way. If they ever do that, just don't. It's just sad. Low effort, high profit. Overwatch 2 and its crew, whether they like it or not, are building a game that does not care about the players. It cares only about one thing: your wallet and how much it can suck out of your wallet. That's all Overwatch 2 cares about. It is a soulless game, and it is incredibly disappointing to see a franchise and a world that could have been so much better just be the absolute pile of turd that it is. So that's one side of the coin. What's currently on the other side of the coin in gaming? That would have to go to Baldur's Gate 3, which is now the highest Metacritic review score ever. Baldur's Gate 3 is now so highly scored, it has now actually surpassed Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I said ever. This is actually just in 2023. It's actually phenomenal. It is incredible how a game that is actually a passion project, that actually went ahead, sat down, polished as much as they could, and actually looked at making a good game rather than a profitable game, and how huge of a difference it makes. And I really do hope for the best for Baldur's Gate 3. I actually really need to go ahead and look at what upgrades I need to make to my gaming PC to see how I can actually play it. There might not be any way for me to play it, but I still want to try. It is impressive to see what Baldur's Gate has done. And you want to know how good Baldur's Gate is? Baldur's Gate is actually so good that it actually caused IGN to actually have a good take. Let that sink in for a minute. IGN actually had a good take because of this. Why? Because IGN went ahead and pointed out kind of the obvious. It's that Baldur's Gate 3 is actually causing almost the entire gaming industry to panic. Because everyone is praising this game. And Baldur's Gate is also taking the approach of saying no microtransactions, no stupid battle pass, no subscription, just old school, as it always has been, a fully functional game out of the gate. No extra nonsense needed. Granted, I fully expect Baldur's Gate 3 eventually to have like some form of DLC or an expansion version launch or something along the lines. I actually don't know. Is Studio what are they called? I already forgot the name of the studio that makes Baldur's Gate. Larian Studios. Are they actually known for doing DLC and that sort of thing? Someone in chat says Larian doesn't usually push expansions ever. Wow. So I mean, Baldur's Gate 3 is out. Someone in chat says all they do is extended editions that are not new purchases and come free to previous owners. Damn. Not gonna lie. That's insane. Actually, that is actually crazy in this day and age for that to actually be what they do. Just whoa. Compare that to the rest of the industry. Even Diablo 4, which would be in a very similar boat. Launch it. Let it be. Sell expansion later. Baldur's Gate 3 is as traditional as it comes, and it is being praised as a breath of fresh air by going back to, I don't know, actually respecting the average person. That's huge. This is actually now causing some developers to go ahead and say, like, well, you can't expect us to do this. We can't expect us to just not go ahead and use effort and not make predatory microtransactions. Here's my question. Why? Why can't Overwatch 2 instead just wait a bit, actually have enough content to justify being a sequel, and then launch to thunderous applause, instead of coming out as a half-baked shell of what it could have been and a giant middle finger to everyone? Why can't Diablo 4 just launch as what it always should have been? A good top-down... What is the Diablo genre anyway? I think it's called an ARPG, but that is not an ARPG. That is its own category. I guess everyone calls it Diablo Lakes, don't they? Why can't it? Hack and slash. There we go. Thank you. Why? Because Bobby Kotick wants to go ahead and get another yacht. It has to launch out sooner. See, chat's giving sarcastic answers. Bobby Kotick demands it because they were busy storing booze in the breast milk fridge, drinking on the job, and committing sexual abuse. I want this to be a massive wake-up call And considering the fact that in the case of Blizzard, and I'm picking on Blizzard because they are like the poster child right now of abusive game companies, mostly because EA is beyond fixing, and quite frankly, nobody cares about EA. Let's be who here has a game franchise that is owned by EA that they care about? Raise your hand. All right, Gary in the back, put down your hand. And the rest of you, I can't see you. Why did you raise your hand sarcastically? You know I can't see you. Also, you're all lying. No. Nobody is looking at how these game companies are running. Nobody is looking at what EA's got and thinking, oh yeah, I need some of that. No, not really. Maybe like one or two. Maybe you want to go ahead and... Oh, didn't EA release a new what you call it? There's like a new Dead Space that's actually technically part of EA, isn't there? All right, I guess that's one. I guess the hopeless that are attached to Sims still need their fix. I'd say I'd be there with Command and Conquer, but just sigh. Someone in chat said people like Madden. No, they don't. You cannot tell me that people who buy Madden are people. I refuse to believe that. They are praying mantises in people costumes. You cannot convince me otherwise. But that's the reason I'm picking on Blizzard here. Blizzard at this point is close to being dead to the gamer world. In a very similar fashion to EA. You see EA on anything, it's considered a mark of death. Blizzard is getting close to that point. In a lot of people's eyes, they're already there. Microsoft has a lot of work to do. Now, at the same time, though, with how successful Baldur's Gate's doing, Nintendo's got to be worried too, right? I mean, Baldur's Gate 3 passed up Tears of the Kingdom in the Metacritic score. So, Nintendo has to respond to this somehow, right? Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the last burb, the last story of the day, the weirdest story of the week. It is Nintendo's answer to how to save Tears of the Kingdom and bring it back to the top of peak gaming. The answer? Filing a patent for many of the basic simple machine functions within the game Tears of the Kingdom. Oh my god, we've gone full! We've gone full Apple patent troll here, haven't we? Remember when Apple would just file patents on just random concepts they had that had no balls to go ahead and do it? Like, oh man, let's file a patent for putting a projector in a phone, or let's file a patent for a head-mounted LCD screen, or let's file a patent for this wacky concept or that wacky concept. Here it is, frickin' Nintendo trying to patent all the core concepts of Tears of the Kingdom. You can't make this stuff up. First off, I am 99% certain that this patent is going to be thrown out and thrown back at the lawyer that presented it very aggressively maybe even lit on fire before being thrown. But considering the fact that Nintendo has pretty much gone out of its way to go ahead and patent, or not really patent, but go ahead and try to sue anyone who goes ahead and even at least makes a funny face at Nintendo or dare to stream their games or think about all this nonsense that Nintendo goes ahead and sues for. This right here just feels like the next evolution in Nintendo's legal defense. Patent all aspects of gaming. What will they think of next? Folks, that's going to do it for this episode of Eagle Eyes on Tech. Thank you so much for listening, and I do encourage you to check out our other works. I swear we got stuff coming. Funny enough, I actually found out there is a kind of server system you can actually set up for DaVinci Resolve, which learning how to do that, and I just want to go ahead and take my time setting everything up so that when we do get the juices flowing, when we get everything set up, it's going to be nice and smooth and we're not taking everything down partway through to go ahead and do it. We're going to Baldur's Gate 3 this, not Overwatch 2 this, but do check out twitch.tv/EagleFalcon. I do stream there most of the days. We're gonna get better at that. Take care. We'll see you next week. The worst thing is that when I was getting this story for Nintendo filing a patent for Link's abilities in Tears of the Kingdom, there was another article that was showing the fact that Nintendo did try to go ahead and patent the concept in a video game of a character jumping through a painting to select levels. It also turns out that, in fact, they did not get that patent either. So apparently Nintendo does this more often. It's just that usually no one even wants to entertain it. But I do find it kind of funny that Nintendo is in fact as petty as we all thought they were. Now let's go ahead and dig through the things and see if Nintendo tried to patent porn inside a video game. Let's actually dig up some real dirt.